See, Philip always leaves stuff laying around. Thank you so much to them. I'm so proud of them and grateful for them. Well, today is obviously Father's Day, and if your father is still with you, it's likely that this is an occasion for which you might have or will very quickly after church is over seek to purchase a gift of some sort. And I was thinking about that whole experience of gift giving for Father's Day or even Mother's Day, and thought specifically about what it was like years ago to witness a particular Mother's Day gift that was especially memorable, not for me to receive or to give, but to watch this gift be given. It was a gift that my dad's dad gave to my grandmother, and it was a gift that he was pretty proud of as well. And I remember we had gone over there after church to celebrate Mother's Day at her house, and there was a big to-do about the gift that she had received, and this special gift that she had gotten from my grandfather was something that maybe some of you guys, it hadn't occurred to you to give. But the gift he gave her was a lawnmower. If you hadn't thought of it, I don't. But in fact, most of you are probably thinking, if I would give my wife a lawnmower for Mother's Day, I can pretty well guarantee I will not be present for Father's Day. But that's not how she felt at all. In fact, my grandmother was thrilled. She was ecstatic. She was so tickled and so proud to get this lawnmower for Mother's Day. Now, if someone would have said to my grandfather, I can't believe that you would have given your wife a lawnmower for Mother's Day. I'm just surprised that you would do something like that. I believe this would be his response. You may not get it, but that's what she wanted. That's what she wanted. You know, there are a lot of things that we wind up experiencing in life where the ultimate rationale is this. It's something that I wanted. I'm experiencing this, I'm doing this, I'm going here, and you may not get it, but what I'm experiencing is because of what I wanted. Hold that thought for just a moment and step back with me for a moment, because today we're continuing in a series that I'm calling Prone to Wander. And the premise behind the series is this. You can have an individual that becomes a follower of Jesus or identifies themselves as a follower of Jesus. And after the decision to begin to follow Jesus, that public profession, then they also connect with a church family. They become part of a church family. But, and it has happened here, it's happened at every church, I suppose, across the country and around the world. You will have individuals who have identified themselves as followers of Jesus who get connected with the church family. And oftentimes it doesn't happen overnight, but incrementally they just start stepping away. A little further, a little further, and a little further, and they just kind of drift off. And after enough passage of time, the name is shared, and you're like, who is that? I don't know if I remember them. I think maybe they used to go here. And it happened because somebody decided to check out, to walk away, to wander off. Now, let me just say plainly that it is my belief, it is my firm conviction, and where I stand with respect to the church, that not because I'm pastor, but because I'm a part of this church, I feel like you need me. I feel like I need you. You matter to me. I hope not just because I'm pastor or in spite of the fact that I'm pastor, that I matter to you, that we need each other. And honestly, it is difficult for me to get the thought as to why in the world someone would just walk away. I don't understand why everybody that says they're a follower of Jesus, why everyone is not in a church today somewhere worshiping with their church family. But there are a lot of people that aren't. And here's the question, how is it that it became that way? How is it that they just stepped away? Even if I don't get it, for many, the reason is this. It's because of what they wanted. They stepped away, they walked away because it's what they wanted. With that in mind, I want you to think about today with me a specific question, which is this. What is the relationship between my wants and my connection with a church family. If I'm saying that individuals have left or walked away, and maybe there's been a time where that was the case for you, where you walked away because you wanted to, what's the relationship or what's the connection between an individual's wants and their connection with a church family? Look with me in your Bibles today to 2 Timothy chapter 4, as I believe God's Word answers that question for us. 2 Timothy chapter 4, starting with verse 9. There Paul says this, verse 9, 2 Timothy chapter 4, "Make every effort to come to me soon, because Demas has deserted me, since he loved this present world and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia, only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you, for he is useful to me in the ministry." It's entirely possible that just glancing at that passage, you say, what in the world does this have to do with anything? It just seems like an afterthought, like an addendum to the end of a letter. But I believe this addendum, or this closing series of words at the end of a letter, helps answer for us the question explaining the relationship between my desires and wants and my connection to a church family. And I believe based on what we see, here's the first connection, and this is it, that the affections of my heart determine the location of my body. The affections of my heart determine the location of my body. Before dealing specifically with what the passage tells us, think with me just a little more broadly in terms of context for a moment, that what we have in 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus, all three of those are considered to be pastoral epistles. The word epistles just means letters, so these are pastoral letters. And they were written by Paul to Timothy, and then obviously Titus to Titus. And they are instructions, they are guidance, they are wise counsel to these young men that are being mentored, being guided, and in many ways working as apprentices for Paul as they are themselves operating as pastors. And so he's helping them. He's trying to mature them and mentor them and coach them. And so these two letters deal with a whole lot of stuff about how to operate with the people of God in the setting of a local church. So in this particular passage, though, we've got Paul, he's been writing to Timothy. And as he is writing to Timothy, we don't know exactly the time, but people that know a lot more and have far more skilled in first century history and in New Testament Greek, many believe that this was written after what we read in the book of Acts. And so what's going on at the end of the book of Acts is that Paul is in jail. He's been imprisoned. But that particular imprisonment is not one that remains. He's able to go free. And after going free, he picks up where he had left off, and he goes back on more missionary journeys. As he is doing that, it winds up that he gets arrested again, and at this point gets sent to Rome, where he is going to have his case heard by the Roman emperor himself. This is a case that is going to ultimately result in Paul receiving the sentence of death by execution. And as he's writing to Timothy, he's writing this letter under arrest in a Roman prison, awaiting a trial before the Roman emperor. And it seems that while he is not certain, Paul is aware of the likely prospect, which is that this is not going to go well. And that once this case is tried, he's not going to be going free. In fact, he's not going to be going anywhere except to the grave. And so as he's finishing this letter, he's also thinking about, candidly, the experience of the finishing of his life. And so he realizes that time is short, and so he says to Timothy, I want you to make every effort to come to see me soon. Why come see me soon? Because the clock is ticking. I don't know how much more time that I've got. And there's opportunity for you to be able to visit with me and for me to pour into you, to give you some instructions, to help the churches that you are seeking to lead. And I want you to come to see me very soon. And he begins at that point to list some of the individuals who had been there, who had been visiting with him. And he describes that there is a guy named Crescens who has gone to Galatia. And the sense is that he's gone there to minister, and he's doing kingdom work, mission work there. And he says that Titus has gone to Dalmatia, which is modern-day southern Yugoslavia. So that's where Titus has gone. These guys were here, but they've left. And then he says, only Luke is with me. Well, which Luke is that? That's the guy that we know that wrote the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. By trade, he had been a doctor, but he is now an affiliate. He is a co-laborer with Paul in not medical work, but in mission work in the advance of the gospel. And so he's saying, hey, Luke's the only guy that's here. Please come see me, but don't waste any time. I may not have a whole lot of time. Only Luke is here. And then he says in verse 10, he says, Demas has deserted me. Now, these other guys, and the context seems to bear out that these other guys left, that they are no longer with Paul, and the reason that they are not with Paul is because they are engaged in kingdom work. They're engaged in ministry. They're engaged in mission efforts and seeking to lead more people and point more people to Jesus. But it doesn't seem that's the case at all for this guy named Demas. Now, Demas is a name that's a shortened form of the name Demetrius. It's a name that's mentioned in Acts 19 and also in 3 John. Paul mentions what he describes as a fellow worker named Demas in the little book of Philemon. And in Colossians 4, we read about a guy named Demas who was not Jewish. Are all those references to the same person? I don't know. No one can say with certainty. What we do know is this, based on what we read here in 2 Timothy, that a guy named Demas is somebody that has been part of the mission work of God connected to the Apostle Paul. That this is a guy that's been engaged in assisting and connected with the ministry of the local church and helping churches get planted and believers discipled and more people coming to know about Jesus, more people coming to know Jesus. And so Demas has been connected with that work, but now he is not. Why? Well, the context tells us. Paul says he's checked out. He doesn't say he's left, he's taken a sabbatical. He says he has deserted me. Now, the word desert, I know some of you like it at the end of a meal, but this is not that type of pleasant dessert. This is essentially someone going AWOL, someone abandoning, someone that has at one point committed themselves, but now they've just kind of left everybody holding the bag. He's saying that's what Demas has done, and the reason, Paul says, is because he has loved this present world. What exactly does that mean? Well, obviously that's pretty loaded language from the Apostle Paul, and exactly what he has in mind, we don't know. But it does seem that for Demas, in his heart and his mind, the stuff of life, and almost certainly the material stuff of life, really mattered in a disproportionate way to him. And maybe it was something as basic as this, that Demas thought, you know what, this whole mission enterprise, this whole kingdom work, this mission effort, if I could check out from this, I could have a better house. I could have a faster camel. I could go to better restaurants. I could have better clothes. It's just costing me too much to be connected to this whole Jesus thing and to this whole kingdom stuff. Are those the specific reasons? I don't know, but the context seems to bear out this simple thought, that the material stuff of life mattered to Demas in ways that the kingdom stuff did not. That the stuff of God, the advance of the gospel, getting more people pointed in Jesus' direction, that stuff did not matter to him. And because of that, what does he do? He checks out. Now this is very simple, but I want you to see it. That it was ultimately Demas's desires, his wants, that determined something. It determined where he was. Demas wanted, Demas desired, he craved the stuff of this life more than the kingdom of God, more than spiritual things, more than ministry, more than missions. And he checked out from the life and the ministry of the church because he wanted other things. This tells us something very simple, which is that the affections, the stuff that you care about ultimately in your heart, the stuff that really matters to you, that's going to determine where you wind up going. It's going to be determining the places that you hang out, and it'll determine, with respect to the church, where it is that you are. Let me say it very plainly. If the stuff of this world, whether that's jobs, homes, sports, music, hobbies, whatever it is, if that's what you care for most, when that is the priority, where you spend your time and where your body winds up going when the church gathers, it shows where your heart is. Why? Because the affections of my heart determine the location of my body? Why is it that there are people that are on the roll of Gate City Baptist Church that have said, I am a follower of Jesus and I want to unite with this church? Why is it that they are not here today? Let me answer that very plainly and simply. For some, maybe it's because of COVID concerns, but the vast majority, that's not the case. The reason is because this is not what they really want. They want other stuff. The stuff of life matters more. And what I'm saying to you is that there is absolutely a relationship between your wants and your connection with a church and a church family, and that the affections of your heart, they are going to determine where your body is. Now, for some period of years now, I haven't regularly worn a tie. Typically at funerals and weddings I wear them, but things have changed with how people dress up for church. And that being said, over the years, I've got a lot of suits and I've got a lot of ties. And the honest truth is this: I like dressing up because I'm telling you, I look good. And you laugh. Anyway, all my life though, I've enjoyed dressing. I really have. Even as a little kid, I like wearing a suit and tie. And I don't mind. Some guys hate wearing a tie. I mean, they view it essentially as a noose. I like a tie. I really do. I think ties look nice. And I've got a stack of ties. And I remember years ago in Charlotte when I was pastoring there, someone did something with respect to ties that I don't like, and that's this: they gave me one. I don't like people to give me ties. Why is that? Because more often than not, they give me ties that I don't like. Maybe I shouldn't be this way, but honestly, I'm very picky. I know that's a colossal shock to you, but I'm picky. And most of the time, if somebody gives me a tie, I don't really care for it. And among the ties that I don't like are those that I really loathe, which are novelty ties. If a tie has a picture on it, I do not want it. And somebody gave me a tie that had Noah's Ark scene on it. That's a Bible story. We'll give this Noah's Ark. He'll love that. Thank you. So now somebody gives me a Noah's Ark tie, and now I'm faced with a dilemma. Because if I don't wear it, then I may offend them. If I do wear it, I may encourage them to give me another one. And maybe somebody else is going to, oh, he likes those ties with pictures. I saw this funny Bugs Bunny tie. That'd be real good. Look at him, get him that. And I'm going to have a real problem. So what exactly am I going to do? And so this is where I landed. That both verbally and in writing, I had said to them, thank you so much for your thoughtfulness and your kindness. It was so nice of you to think of me and think about me, but I never put that tie on. Judge me if you will. But you know what? That communicated something to them, didn't it? It said, Michael didn't like that tie. It's very simple logic, though, isn't it? That how we operate physically, the choices that we make with our bodies, that says something about what's going on inside. And there is absolutely a relationship, and it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. Why is it that there are people that say, hey, I'm a follower of God, they become part of and get connected with the church family, and they say, I'm in this, and then over time, and it doesn't happen overnight, but they just drift away, they wander off, they completely check out. Why is that? It's because the affections of your heart will determine the location of your body. And if the things of God matter, if the worship of His people gathered together matters, if that is something of consequence, and if supporting the work of ministry in a particular community and the advance of the gospel worldwide, if that matters, if that is something you really care about, I'm telling you, you will be connected to a local church. You will be an active part of a church family. But if you don't, if it doesn't really matter, if that's not where your heart is, I'm telling you, your body won't be there either. There's absolutely a relationship, and it is. Again, the affections of my heart determine the location of my body. But there's another principle that we see communicated in this passage, and it's this. Past desires do not prevent present returns. Past desires do not prevent present returns. All right, so Paul has just described Demas in candidly less than flattering terms. This is a guy who he says has deserted me. This is a guy who has put his hand to the plow, who has walked away. This is a guy who is completely checked out because it says he loves this present world. The stuff that is going to pass away matters more to him than the stuff that is of eternal consequence. And he says, Crescens is gone. He's ministering in Galatia. Titus has gone to Dalmatia. Luke is here. Timothy, please come. But notice this little addendum. He says at the end of verse 11, bring Mark with you, for he is useful to me in the ministry. Bring Mark with you because he is useful to me in the ministry. Who is this Mark guy? If you want, you can flip back, but if you don't have to either. But if you go back to Acts chapter 13, this is where we're first introduced to this guy named Mark. And what's going on back in Acts chapter 13 is that Paul and Barnabas are engaged, in the work of missions. And they are going about and they are leading people to Jesus in particular cities, and they are discipling them and helping churches get birthed and formed and established. And then they're going to another city and they're doing that and they're doing it again and they're doing it again. And as they are getting ready to go on this particular mission journey, what happens is that Barnabas suggests that they take his cousin, a guy named John Mark, with them. And so in verse 5 of Acts chapter 13, it says that they proclaimed the word of God in the Jewish synagogues. They also had John, or John Mark, as their assistant. That's the cousin of Barnabas. And so he's with them. He's on this mission journey, and the sense is he's excited, he's grateful to be a part. He is someone that is a benefit to have him as part of the team. And it says in verse 6 that they head off to Paphos, and so they're continuing the work of ministry, continuing to go from place to place. But listen to this. This is down in verse 13 of Acts 13. Paul and his companions set sail from Paphos, came to Perga in Pamphylia, but, and this is the important phrase, but John left them and went back to Jerusalem. John Mark says, it's been real and it's been fun, but it's not been real fun. Got to go. Got to go home. Got to head back to Jerusalem. Context seems to bear out for us and to us that his motivation was not because there was some pressing urgency back at home. There was some obligation, some reasonable reason as to why it was that he was checking out. Maybe it was very simply that he got homesick. Maybe it was that he decided, there's stuff that I would rather do. And so what happens is that he does absolutely check out. And as he checks out, Paul and Barnabas continue the work of ministry, and they continue to go around from place to place sharing the gospel. By the time you get to Acts chapter 15, in verse 36, we're told this. After some time had passed, Paul said to Barnabas, let's go back and visit the brothers and sisters in every town we have preached the word of the Lord and see how they're doing. That's a pretty reasonable thing to suggest. Hey, we've been to this place and that place. Let's go back and check up on them and see how they're doing. If we can help them, if we can encourage them, if we can settle some stuff, maybe reestablish the strike zone, maybe that would be of help. Paul seems to think, man, this is a great idea. Yeah, let's do that because we want to have an ongoing relationship. Verse 37 says that Barnabas wanted to take along John Mark. Hey, we're getting ready to go. Let's go retrace our steps and let's take John Mark with us. In verse 38, Paul insisted they should not take along this man. Notice this word. He says, who had deserted them. It's the same word that's used to describe what happened with Demas. This is a guy that checked out. This is a guy who went AWOL. This is a guy who just simply walked away. This is a guy that the stuff of eternal consequence doesn't matter like the stuff of temporary consequence. And he checked out. He walked away. He deserted us. He left us holding the bag. And Barnabas says, I think we ought to let him go back with us. I feel like we should give him a second chance. And while Barnabas is saying that we should give him a second chance, Paul is saying fat chance. I don't want him going with us. I don't want a quitter hanging with us anymore. This is a guy that we can't depend on. This is a guy who has a proven track record. This is a guy who walked away. This is a guy who checked out. He is one certainly that is prone to wander, and it is unreasonable that I or anyone should depend on him at all in matters of eternal consequence. Verse 39 says, they had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. You got Paul and Barnabas. Barnabas insisting John Mark should go. Paul insisting John Mark shouldn't. And there's no way you can reconcile that. And so the only thing they can do is part ways. And that's what they did. We're told that Barnabas left and he took John Mark with him and heads off to Cyprus. At that point, Paul gets Silas and he heads to Syria. They part ways. I mean, these brothers in ministry have had such a sharp disagreement over John Mark. We can't stay doing this together. Thankfully, even though they parted ways, it seems that they parted in ways where the bridges were not burned. What I want you to know, though, is that the John Mark of Acts 13 and 15 is the Mark of 2 Timothy 4. It's the same guy. All right, so get this in mind. John Mark is the quitter. He's the guy that says, I'm in, and then he has a change of heart and he's like, I'm out. He's the reason that Paul and Barnabas split ways, that they part company, that they head in opposite directions. But now, keep in mind, this is at the end of Paul's life. Execution is on the horizon. And he's saying, only Luke is here with me. Please come as quick as you can, Timothy. But what does he say? He says, bring Mark with you. Why? Because he is useful to me in the ministry. Now, we are not told with any details as to what all transpired. But what seems to have happened is that John Mark has a change in heart, a change of heart. That the stuff of God, that the work of ministry, that kingdom-minded stuff starts to matter to him in ways that it should have in the first place. That kingdom tasks mattered and ultimately mattered to him. And he wants to engage and get reconnected with that work and connected with that process. And while it was at one point that he checked out because of the affections of his heart, because of the desires, because of his wants, it is also the case that he re-engages because of the desires, because of the wants of his heart. And so how does it turn out? It turns out pretty well. You got Paul, this guy who was getting ready to experience a martyr's death, some of the final people that he's going to be able to invest in, and he wants John Mark, this guy who had been a quitter, he wants him there because, again, he says he's useful to me in the ministry. Now, what does this say to us in terms of application and what it is that we've been talking about? Well, again, I believe it means this, that there are past desires that you can have experienced that do not prevent present returns. Let me make that even more simple. If someone stepped away because of misplaced or bad desires, they can experience a change of heart that they not only can, they should come back and absolutely can get connected, reconnected, and re-engaged. But it requires a change of heart. How do you experience that? Eddie Espinoza is a name that you may not be familiar with. He is not a celebrity by any stretch. In fact, through 2016 was a principal at a school in Anaheim, California. He came to know Christ in 1969, but like so many, began over time to drift in his relationship with the Lord. He was driving to work on busy California roads in 1982 when the whole experience of his relationship with God started to go through his mind. And he realized how far he had drifted. And these are his words. He said, I had slowly become complacent. I acknowledged my complacency and I prayed to the Lord, the only way that I can follow you is for you to change my appetite, my desires, the things that draw me away. God, you must change my heart. As he is praying that, driving down a California road on his way to school, he said this song began to come to him. And he said, I didn't even know what the next line was until I just began to sing the next line. He said that he reached for a scrap of yellow paper so that when he stopped at the next traffic light, he could scribble it down as quickly as he could. Maybe it is that you are familiar with what he wrote. Change my heart, O God, make it ever true. Change my heart, O God, may I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me, this is what I pray. Change my heart, O God, make it ever true. Change my heart, O God, may I be like you. If I could just tie all this up together very simply, it's this. People are prone to wander, and people will check out because of their desires. The affections of your heart will determine the location of your body. But just because the desires have been that way in the past does not mean that if you realize this, and if you're watching today, maybe this is exactly what you need to hear. You can experience a change of heart, but to experience that, you're going to need some help. And the simple help that you can get is absolutely available. And what it takes is a simple statement to the Lord. Lord, will you change my heart? The things that matter to you, will you cause them to matter to me in ways where the desires of your heart become the desires of my heart, and so that I am not one that is any longer prone to wander. Will you bow your heads with me?